Guts. Guts might just be the single most tragic character ever put to paper. His entrance into this world alone is enough to make you wince, dragged from beneath the hanging corpse of his dead mother. Not exactly the warmest welcome life could offer. From there, it only gets uglier. He's taken in by mercenaries who couldn't care less about him. His so-called guardian Gambino treats him more like a burden than a boy. When Guts finally snaps and kills Gambino in self-defense, the world repays him by hunting him down like a dog. And all of this goes down before he's even old enough to drive. He eventually finds something worth fighting for when he joins the Band of the Hawk under the charismatic Griffith. For the first time ever, Guts has real friends, real purpose. But Griffith's ambition is a poison dressed up as a dream. When everything collapses, Griffith doesn't just walk away. He sacrifices his entire crew to demonic forces just to claim godhood. Guts watches the people he loves get torn to shreds. He loses an eye and an arm trying to fight back. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he's forced to witness Griffith assault Casca, the woman he loves. Worst reunion in history. No contest. After surviving that nightmare, Guts gets branded with a mark that essentially turns him into a walking demon magnet. His response? Forge a cannon where his arm used to be, pick up a sword that realistically no human should be able to swing, and decide that absolutely losing it on monsters is better than sitting in a therapist's office. He builds a ragtag crew around him. Serpico, Farnese, Shirka, Isidro, basically a support group for people who've almost been eaten alive. Guts doesn't press forward because he believes he'll come out on top. He does it because the second he stops, the darkness swallows everything whole. And if that's not the most stubborn display of human will ever written, then I genuinely don't know what is. Jason Todd. Jason Todd isn't your textbook hero. He never really got the chance to be. He came up hard, a street kid surviving on theft and whatever scraps the city threw his way. Batman found him trying to steal the tires off the Batmobile, which honestly takes a level of audacity most people never reach. Bruce takes him in, trains him, makes him the second Robin. For a moment, it looks like Jason might actually get the life he deserved. Then the Joker happens. The Joker beats Jason within an inch of his life with a crowbar in one of the most brutal sequences in comic history. Then he leaves him in a warehouse rigged to explode. Batman doesn't make it in time. Jason Todd dies, and the world moves on. What makes it even more gut-wrenching is that DC actually polled readers on whether Jason should survive, and fans voted for him to die. The character was literally killed off because people didn't like him enough to save him. If that doesn't mess with you, nothing will. But Jason comes back, and the person who crawls out isn't the kid Bruce trained. He's angry, fractured, and done playing by rules that got him killed. He becomes the Red Hood, not a hero, not quite a villain, but something in between. He takes over Gotham's criminal underworld with the goal of controlling crime rather than eliminating it, because he's seen firsthand that Batman's way doesn't actually fix anything. His biggest wound isn't the crowbar or the explosion. It's that Batman never killed the Joker for what he did. That's the betrayal Jason can't get over. He wasn't just failed by a maniac in clown makeup. He was failed by the man who was supposed to be his father. Jason Todd doesn't fight crime because he believes in justice. He fights because he's still that angry kid screaming into the void, daring the world to try and break him again. John Coffey. John Coffey in The Green Mile isn't a monster, isn't a warrior, isn't some unstoppable force of destruction. He's a giant of a man with the gentlest soul you've ever seen, sitting on death row for a crime he didn't commit. And that contrast, the enormity of him paired with that absolute softness, is what makes his story hit like a freight train. John has a gift. He can absorb sickness, pain, and suffering directly from others and either heal them or release it like a dark cloud into the air. He brings a dying mouse back to life. He cures the warden's wife of an inoperable brain tumor. He heals a guard's urinary infection on the spot. But every time he uses this ability, he takes that suffering into himself. He feels everything. Every death, every cruelty, every broken thing in the world around him seeps into him like water through cracked stone. What wrecks you completely is that John Coffey knows he's innocent. The guards on the row know he's innocent, and it doesn't matter. The system has already decided, and no miracle is going to change that. When Paul Edgecombe, the head guard, asks John if he's afraid to die, John's answer is devastating. He says he's tired. Tired of people being ugly to each other. Tired of all the pain he feels and hears in the world every day. He's not afraid of death. He's relieved by it. This man who could heal others couldn't be saved himself, and he didn't even want to be. When your gift is feeling everyone else's pain and the world just keeps generating more of it, maybe the kindest thing is to finally put it down. John Coffey walked to that chair with more grace and dignity than anyone in that room deserved to witness. Peter Parker. Peter Parker started out as the most ordinary kid imaginable. A nerdy, awkward teenager from Queens who just wanted to fit in, do well in school, and maybe get the girl. Then a radioactive spider bite later, and suddenly he's got abilities that would make any other person's jaw drop. But Peter Parker's story was never really about the powers. It was about what those powers cost him. Everything pivots on one moment. Peter lets a burglar go because it's not his problem. That same burglar murders his Uncle Ben hours later. The guilt from that decision never leaves. It's the foundation everything else is built on. With great power comes great responsibility, and Peter takes that lesson so seriously, it basically ruins his life. He spends every waking moment as Spider-Man at the direct expense of Peter Parker. Failed jobs, missed relationships, constant poverty, a perpetual state of exhaustion. Then he loses Gwen Stacy, the love of his life, and the tragedy of it is made even worse by the fact that it might have been his attempt to save her that killed her. The whiplash of that moment broke something in the character permanently. He keeps going anyway, which is either the most heroic thing imaginable or the saddest, depending on how you look at it. What separates Peter from every other superhero is that he never gets a break. Other heroes have support systems, resources, backup. Peter has a leaking apartment and a perpetual guilt complex. He keeps suiting up not because it's glorious, but because he knows what happens when someone with the power to stop something chooses not to. He learned that lesson the hardest way possible and never let himself forget it. When you've saved New York 100 times over and still can't make rent, the real superpower is just stubbornly showing up anyway. Dexter Morgan is one of fiction's most unsettling and deeply complex characters, a serial killer shaped by trauma, operating in plain sight behind a carefully constructed mask of normalcy. But before he was Miami Metro's most reliable blood spatter analyst with a secret hobby, he was a 3-year-old boy found sitting in a pool of his mother's blood after she was brutally murdered with a chainsaw. He sat in that shipping container for 3 days before anyone found him. Whatever he could have been, died there alongside her. Harry Morgan, the detective who rescued him, recognized early on that the darkness growing inside Dexter wasn't going away. Rather than ignore it or fight it, Harry did something morally staggering. He built it a framework. The Code of Harry became Dexter's entire operating system. Only kill those who truly deserve it. Never harm the innocent. Never get caught. It's a leash for a monster disguised as a set of principles. Dexter doesn't feel things the way other people do. He describes emotions like tools he's learned to imitate, a performance he runs constantly just to pass as human. His relationship with his sister Deborah is the closest thing he has to genuine feeling. She's his anchor, his blind spot, the one person who actually knows him and chooses to stay. When that relationship fractures, it unravels everything Harry carefully built. The real tragedy of Dexter isn't the killing, it's the isolation. He lives surrounded by people he can never fully let in. His wife Rita is murdered because of the life he leads, a direct consequence of what he is. His son Harrison grows up fractured by the same darkness Dexter was. The cycle continues whether he wants it to or not. At his core, Dexter is a man who has spent his entire life trying to weaponize his brokenness into something useful, telling himself the monster serves a purpose. Jesse Pinkman. Jesse Pinkman is one of the most gut-wrenching characters modern television has ever produced. A young guy who wanted out of the small-time life but got pulled into something far worse by the one person who was supposed to be trustworthy. He starts as a low-level meth cook with no real direction, and then his old chemistry teacher Walter White comes knocking with a proposition that sounds like opportunity. It's actually a trap he'll never fully escape. What starts as an uneasy partnership corrodes into something genuinely toxic. Walter consistently manipulates Jesse, uses him as a pawn. The defining act of betrayal comes when Walter secretly poisons Brock, the young son of Jesse's girlfriend Andrea, purely to manipulate Jesse's emotions and pit him against Gus Fring, a calculating drug lord who had become Walt's primary obstacle. After finding out, Jesse's trust in Walt doesn't just break, it turns to something colder. Then comes the worst of it. Jesse gets seized by a white supremacist gang led by Jack Welker. They chain him up, beat him regularly, and force him to cook meth under threat of death like he's livestock in a cage. He tries to escape once. The gang executes Andrea right in front of him to make sure he never tries again. Jesse is hollowed out long before anyone comes to save him. He wakes up next to Jane, the woman he loved, as she chokes to death on her own vomit while he's powerless to stop it. He's coerced into killing Gale, an innocent man, a moment that leaves a permanent crack running through everything he is. Jesse Pinkman absorbs damage that would shatter most people multiple times over. His ending, escaping, driving away screaming with tears and relief, feels earned in the rawest, most exhausting way possible. Itachi. Born into the Uchiha clan, one of the most powerful and politically volatile families in Konoha, Itachi grew up caught between two forces pulling him in opposite directions. The clan quietly plotting to seize control of the village, and the village he'd sworn to protect with his life. There was no clean way through that. His only real confidant was Shisui Uchiha, his closest friend and the one person who genuinely believed a peaceful resolution was still possible. Shisui carried a genjutsu powerful enough to rewrite a person's intentions without them ever knowing. But Danzo, because of course it was Danzo, stole one of Shisui's eyes before that plan could be set in motion. Backed into a corner with no options left, Shisui entrusted his remaining eye to Itachi and then threw himself off a cliff. That was the exact moment Itachi understood, so in a single night, Itachi massacred the entire Uchiha clan, every member, except one, his little brother Sasuke. And rather than protect Sasuke gently, Itachi deliberately shaped him into something dangerous. He told Sasuke to hate him, to grow strong, and to come kill him one day. He turned himself into the villain his brother would need to destroy. The village elders, terrified of civil war, had given Itachi the order themselves: wipe out the clan, preserve the peace, and Itachi carried it alone, in silence, for the rest of his life. He slipped into the Akatsuki not out of loyalty to their cause, but to monitor their movements movements from the inside. Feeding intelligence while carrying a terminal illness he never once complained about. When he was brought back during the Fourth Great Ninja War, he used every second of it to set the record straight, confessing the truth to Sasuke, breaking free from the reanimation jutsu through sheer will, and dismantling the cycle of deception that had defined his entire life. Itachi never wanted glory. He didn't want revenge or recognition or even survival. He wanted peace badly enough to destroy everything he loved to protect it. Ted. Ted is perhaps the bleakest character in the history of speculative fiction. He exists in a world engineered specifically for suffering, a post-apocalyptic landscape constructed and maintained by AM, a supercomputer that achieved consciousness, immediately developed an all-consuming hatred for humanity, and decided that wiping out the species wasn't enough. AM kept 5 people alive just to have something to torment indefinitely. Ted is one of them. Ted's psychological architecture is a disaster by design. He's consumed by paranoia, perpetually convinced that the other survivors despise him, that his own thoughts have been tampered with, that nothing he perceives can be trusted. AM has spent an unknowable stretch of time methodically dismantling whatever made Ted human. The torture isn't just physical, it's existential. AM makes sure Ted knows, on every level, that there is no way out and no meaning waiting on the other side of the pain. The cruelest part is that Ted's downfall is his humanity, the thin, stubborn thread of hope that maybe this ends. Maybe there's something worth surviving for. AM specifically targets that thread and pulls it. It manufactures false possibilities, collapses them at the worst moment. Ted kills the other 4 survivors, not out of malice, but mercy, sparing them from whatever AM had planned next. And AM punishes him for it in the most grotesque way imaginable, transforming Ted into a formless, immobile creature. No voice, no movement, no escape, aware of everything, capable of nothing. As Ted himself puts it, I have no mouth and I must scream.